Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel and welcome back to the second live stream of my Ultimate University Guide live stream series. Today I'm going to be joined by a really special guest. I'm going to go to the screen now. Yeah, so today I'm joined by Lucy, who is going into her third year of medicine at Cambridge University. If Lucy, you'd like to just introduce yourself, introduce who you are, just how are you?
Hi everyone, so I'm Lucy and I'm going into my third year at Cambridge, and next year I'll be integrating in PDN, but more specifically neuroscience as part of it. And so I run the Instagram account Book of Bones, and I've been sharing my study notes and my study tips, and that's how I am, and I'm feeling a good day.
Yes. And random question, how warm is it where you are? Because here where I live, it's boiling hot. I think it's like 33 degrees or something ridiculous.
Oh, well, it says it's 24 degrees, but it feels much hotter than that right now.
It's so warm. Oh, honestly, make sure if you're out, guys, make sure you're wearing your sunscreen. But yeah, anyways, thank you for everyone who's tuning in. I'm seeing everyone's comments. And yeah, today we're just going to be talking about the UCAT. Obviously, this year is a bit different because one, we're able to do the UCAT online, and two, the dates were kind of pushed back later because of the whole lockdown situation. But yeah, we're just here to kind of share our tips on how we managed to do so well and get over 700. So yeah, we're just gonna start answering a few of the questions that were sent in. I'm gonna prioritize the questions that have been sent in through YouTube because you guys are obviously here. So okay, the first question, right, sent in by Madeleine, who asks, any niche tips for improving stagnated scores? My exam is in 4 days and I'm literally stuck with 600 averages. Lucy, do you want to attempt the question first?
Okay, so if you find that you're maybe reaching a plateau, then the best way to get out of that plateau is to take a small break from it, do some other stuff, and then come back and focus on the areas that you identify the areas you need to work on, and come back to those and work on those specifically.
For sure. I guess I definitely experienced that quite a lot. I guess especially the days before, I felt that there were certain periods where I was stagnating. I kept doing the mini mocks and I wasn't seeing any improvement. But for me, what really helped me is to be consistent. Although I wasn't seeing any improvement, if I looked at it over a grand scheme of things, so over a period of 2 weeks, I saw the improvement there. So although you're not seeing improvements from test to test during the same day, just keep going. Consistency is key, and hopefully in your exam 4 days time, you'll see that all your hard work has paid off. And sometimes you just need to kind of take a step back. So when I found that I dedicated a whole day to, say, situational judgment, and I was just doing questions based on situational judgment alone. I was doing mini mocks just situational judgment based. I found that that's when I stagnated the most. When I took a step back and either I took a break or I approached different sections of the UCAT, I found that when I returned back to doing situational judgment, I saw some change there, because sometimes it's important that you kind of take a step out of just the situational judgment world or the abstract reasoning world. But yeah, hopefully that's answered your question. We're about to move on to the next one, which has also been sent by Madeleine. Thank you so much for your questions. There's so many sent in by you. Right, next one. How did each section on Medify compare to the real exam?
Oh, well, I didn't use Medify. I used the Medic portal, which was free when I was taking my UCAT, but since now has become a paid question bank. So would you like to take this question?
Okay, yeah, sure. I didn't realize that the Medic portal was now paid, as in there's no free access at all.
I think there's just a trial of a few questions, but then the question bank is just you pay for a subscription for a few months for it now. So yeah, it's changed since.
Oh, that's so crazy.
2 years ago.
I used Medify. When did I do my UCAT? 2 years ago when I did it. I think I did it 2 years ago. Yeah, I used Medify 2 years ago, and I found that in terms of the consistency between scores on Medify and scores in the real exam, there was consistency. The questions, for one, were very similar to on Medify. Also, the outlook, how the actual test looks on Medify, was very similar to the exams. So it definitely prepared me for doing my exam. In terms of whether it was my real exam compared to medify in terms of the scores, I guess I'll never know, because I obviously did the real exam just once, whereas I was doing medify exams all the time. And also you have the added kind of condition of being really stressed during your real exam. So I kind of just pushed that to the back of my mind, just forgot about what the real exam was like. But yeah, medify is definitely very similar to the real exam, and I highly recommend it as a tool. It is a paid resource, but it's something around £50, £55 for like 2 months of practice, which is more than enough time to get you prepared for your UCAT. Okay, cool. Right, next question. Also sent in by Madeleine. Wow, okay, right. Madeleine asks, the best methods for each section in terms of timing.
Oh, okay. So there are very specific timings for each section. So with the abstract reasoning, you only have like 14 seconds per question. And for the abstract reasoning, I would recommend you do the guess, skip, and flag method if you don't know the answer to the question. Like, look through it. If you can answer it. Otherwise, guess it, flag it, and then move on and come to it at the end. But have that answer down, because you're not negatively marked. And it's the same for all the sections. But for example, for verbal reasoning, you have a passage which extends over a few questions. It's probably better you prioritize your time understanding the passage before like glancing at the questions more quickly, spending less time on each individual one.
Yeah, exactly as Lucy said, and I guess like she kind of covered all the tips I was going to say for verbal reasoning and the other section. I guess the flag move on technique is so important, because naturally as students, and a lot of people applying to medicine are going to be ambitious students who want to get 100% in everything. And when I was preparing, naturally I felt the need to want to get every single question correct, and it took so much for me to admit that I did not understand a question and to move on. But we have to realize that with the UCAT, every single question is weighted the same. So if you're stuck at question number 14 in verbal reasoning, and it's a really tough topic and it's really difficult, and you don't move on, you risk reducing the time that you have to answer questions which are later on in your test, which may be easier. It's so important that we get used to just realizing this question is too hard, move on, flag it, move on, just in case, easier questions come up later. And I can give kind of advice regarding quantitative reasoning, because the one tip that kind of saved me in terms of timing is learning keyboard shortcuts. At the time, I had a massive HP laptop which had like the number pad on the right hand side, and it meant that when I was using the calculator, instead of me clicking the different calculator buttons on screen with my mouse, or typing it in using my standard keyboard, all I had to do was just type it in on the number pad on the right hand side, and it would come up, and it saved me a good 10 seconds per question. And as you continue to do the quantitative reasoning, that time adds up, and that could be used to gain you an extra 20, 30, 40 points. So honestly guys, learn your shortcuts, learn how to use the computer. I never learned how to use the memory function. I still don't know how to use it to this day. What about you Lucy? Did you find that helped you?
Oh yeah, I definitely use keyboard shortcuts, especially using the number pad on the right. It really speeds up calculations, and also like the next and previous, it means you don't have to move your mouse around to move on to the next passage. And yeah, definitely make sure before you flag and skip, make sure you actually mark an answer, even if it's just a complete guess, because you're not negatively marked. You might guess it right. That's the biggest tip I'd say.
Yeah, so true. I think it's important to realise you're not negatively marked. So yeah, flag, move on, best technique out here. Right, next question. I'm going to mix up a little bit, and hopefully we'll return back to your questions, Madeleine, because you've sent in so many. Next one is by unearthly.tea, who asks, I'm literally stuck with only 37 out of 69 for SJT, and I'm only getting band 3. My UCAT is on Monday, and I really want a band 2. So yeah, Lucy, go forward.
Well, I'm probably not the best person to answer this, because I actually did get a band 3. But I'm just saying that if you do happen to get a band 3, it's not the end of the world. Like, I still got interviews at like the UCAT universities, even with a band 3. But in order to actually improve your situational judgment, I would say looking at model answers and seeing their explanations is probably the best way to go about it. And I'm just like, if you haven't already done this, reading the GMC guidelines on what makes a good doctor, understanding those. essentially just making sure that you do the best in the scenario that causes harm to the least amount of people whilst also helping the person at hand, and it's not some off-topic thing that you're caring about.
Yes, yeah. I think it's important to note, as Lucy said, that you don't always need band 1, band 2 to get interviews for med schools. However, some med schools do require you to get above a band 3, but definitely check out what the university requires of you through like the admissions page to know exactly which university to apply to once you've got your SJT score. For me, I managed to get a band 1 in my exam, and during my medify preparation I was actually kind of oscillating between band 1, band 2 and sometimes band 3. For me, what helped was there are familiar circumstances that keep coming up, familiar scenarios that keep coming up. For example, the ones about consent. So a junior doctor happens to take a patient's kind of files home. What is the most appropriate response? Those sort of questions came up all the time. So for me, what I found out is that if I were to write down the responses using Medify to the I just got a notification saying stream quality is being automatically lowered because internet connection. Okay. If I was to get a constant scenario that's constantly coming up, if I'm able to find out the standard answer to this, write it down so that I know for next time, it means that when that scenario does come up in my real thing, I will have that kind of answer already set in my mind. And again, practice helps for all the sections. Once you start to get accustomed to the sort of questions that you're exposed to, when you're in the exam yourself, all it's going to be is revision. You're going to see a question, you're going to see keywords that stick out, and you're going to be like, yes, I've done a question like this before, I know what kind of answer they're looking for. And just as Lucy said, the GMC guidelines of good medical practice is definitely a good read. It's a very lengthy document. What I found helpful for me is typing in keywords. They have like a search feature, so if you wanted to know more about what the GMC requires in terms of confidentiality, type that in confidentiality, etc., and it comes up with all the information you need. Hopefully that answers your question. And yeah, practice is key. And for me, I found that my scores on the actual day were so much different to in practice, which is kind of weird. I don't know. Did you find the same, Lucy?
So when I was using the medic portal, they were like fluctuating all over the place. Like when I was doing situational judgment, it was just going up and down the bands when I was doing the practice tests. But again, it does, like, what you do in practice isn't necessarily reflected on the day. You can get pretty close, but again, it's as Fran said, there are patterns and you will be able to recognize them eventually, especially for like abstract reasoning. There's certain things they always like to ask for that are really broke. But if you go through the questions, enough questions, you'll see those patterns and like think about those first instead of going on your normal instinct, which might not be what they're asking about.
Cool. Okay. Linking on to what we've been speaking about, I got a question on my Instagram which I think relates quite a lot, and it was about how to let me find the question. What did you do the day before your exam? I didn't manage to get it on screen. This was sent in by Isabel Wood, and I think this is like a really relevant question because so many of you guys have your exam soon. What do we need to do the night before, the day of our exam?
Okay, well, so the night before, I would just say relax. But if you find that you have like last minute worries about how you're going to do, just take a deep breath, relax and meditate. But one of the good tactics that I had was, so about 3 days before the exam I did a mock, and then I rested a day, and then the day before I did another mock, and it's just to get me into the mindset of the exam. And then I did no other revision for that day, just did the mock and then rested, went to sleep early, got up, hydrated, had a good breakfast on the day of the exam. And you have to make sure you get there, like they say 15 minutes, I'd say get there half an hour early or maybe even earlier, just so that you're accustomed and you're not rushed, and you want to be in the most comfortable situation on exam day. So yeah, that's what I think. Just relax the day before, because the worst thing you can do is worry yourself and then stress yourself out, and then you won't perform as well on test day.
So true. Honestly, agree. the day before my exam, just as Lucy, I relaxed, guys. Best believe I went through 4 or 5 episodes of Vampire Diaries the day before my exam, because as a person, I always feel like I need to be doing work. So like the day before my exam, I was like, Fran, why are you not doing UCAT practice? But honestly, that stress does not help. If anything, it will make you feel more nervous, more anxious, and kind of decrease your productivity and your performance on the day. So if you can put yourself in a really comfortable, relaxed position the days before your exam, honestly, you're going to optimize your performance on the day. And the morning, one thing I recommend is that if you have the chance to, book your exam in the morning. Reason being is you get it over and done with straight away. Because I did mine at like 8 o'clock in the morning. So I was at the test centre, as Lucy said, over half an hour before. If you book it in the morning, you get it done straight away. Whereas if you put it for the afternoon, you spend the whole morning, although you want to prepare or whatever, read over notes, you spend it worrying. Like, think about how we all feel the day of our exams, especially like our GCSE or A-levels exams, especially if they're afternoon exams. You go into school saying, I'm going to get through 5 pages of revision. What do you actually do? You end up like worrying with your friends and stressing your friends out, and your friends stressing you out. Like, you can't actually concentrate on it. So yeah, get it out of the way as soon as possible. Try and book it in the morning. If it's in the afternoon, don't worry, just spend kind of your morning relaxing and taking your mind off things. But yeah, hopefully that's answered your question. Moving on to the next. Right, Jess has just said, I'm not particularly interested in medicine, but I'm still watching because Fran is amazing. That's so cute. Thank you so much. Emelia Bature says, I don't do A-level maths and I'm finding QR so hard, even though I got an A star at GCSEs. So what kind of advice can we give her for the QR section?
I think this is your specialty.
All right, cool. So I did do A-level maths, but I guess I didn't use a lot of my A-level maths for the QR section. What helped optimize my score was nailing every single type of question for the QR. One good thing about programs such as Medify, and I think the Medic portal also, is that they break down the types of questions that you have for QR. So you have graph questions, statistics questions, conversion questions, pie chart, like all these different types of questions. And from practice, you'll be able to see which questions are you best at and which questions are you weaker at. There's no point practicing what you're good at. It feels good because you get the questions correct, but on the day, like, you can't get it any more right, if you get what I mean. The most kind of effective way of revising is doing questions that you're weaker at. It may feel that much more harder, or it may make you feel that much more stupid because you're less likely to get it right, but it's honestly the most effective way of practicing, because you end up turning those weaknesses into strengths. In terms of tips for the QR, get used to skimming through questions. For me, what helped was whenever I do like intense kind of questions or exams, like my eyes are literally fixated on the questions. So I'm on my laptop, like skim through the questions really, really quickly. And again, as I said before, if you feel as though the question is too hard or there's way too much information and there may be a simpler question later on, flag and move on, and then return back to it if you've got time. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be releasing videos, individual videos on all the sections on my channel, so stay tuned for that, but I hope that's really helped. Right, okay, next question.
Can I just add something?
Yeah, of course.
So with QR, you get a whiteboard, which you can use throughout the whole test. But I would recommend, so I'm someone that likes writing down a lot of working when I do maths. I would definitely recommend using your noteboard, which I think the online exam is now on the screen, which I'm not sure how that works, but yeah, I would recommend writing down your working if you find it hard to like keep track of what's going on. And also that there are certain measurements that you should like know, because they like to ask about acres for some reason, and it's worth learning those conversions just to like help speed things up.
Yes, for sure. Ooh, okay. Yeah, for sure. All right, let's move on to the next question. Ooh. Aksan asks, how to start with learning and revising for the UCAT? This is a big question. This is such a big question.
Cool. Okay. That's quite a big question. So the UCAT doesn't need any like prior knowledge, which means the best way to revise for it is just to jump in and do questions. but I would recommend not starting out too strong. Just try a few from each section at first and get familiar with them. And also, once you've sort of tried a few of them, look at a guide and see what type of questions are available in each section. They do explain all this on the UCAT website, or you could watch a YouTube video on it, which Fran will be putting out. I've got a video on the UCAT as well. And watch someone explain all like the types of questions, because knowing the types of questions is more important than actually sort of doing them. Because the main thing with the UCAT is understanding what they're trying to ask you. Because with abstract reasoning, they're trying to test your pattern solving ability or ability to recognize a sequence. With all the other sections, they're trying to test a specific skill. And if you know what specific skill you're being tested on, you can revise for it better. So I would say that's a good starting point.
Cool. Lucy's like saying it all, and I'm just gonna be like the backup dancer, sideman, just be like, yep, what she said. I guess what I can add is in terms of starting with your preparation, because it can seem really, really daunting coming from year 11 or year 12 whenever you're doing the exam. Wait, you don't do it, come from year 12 or year 13, doing this massive exam, which is like over 2 hours long, can seem very daunting. So what I recommend is when you first start preparing for your UCAT, maybe take an hour or two just to kind of look through what types of questions are going to be asked. As Lucy said, what really helped for me is going over YouTube videos. So Karma Medic, shout out to this guy, amazing guy. He has a whole series of videos where he actually sits through exams and he videos his videos and records himself, so you can follow along with him and you can see how he processes the questions and his thought pattern to achieving the questions. He's an absolute G and helped me so much in my journey. So if you're starting with your UCAT, maybe kind of watch a few of his videos where he explains what the UCAT is and follow along some of his videos where he attempts the questions, so you know whether you personally would need more preparation for that section or less preparation. And I guess you can tailor the amount of time you'll need for it. I guess for me, I gave myself 4 weeks of preparation to start learning the UCAT. What about you, Lucy? How long did you spend on your UCAT every day, and when did you start?
So I started about 2.5 weeks before the exam, like doing intense revision. But like before that, so I did it in the summer. So a few weeks before that, I started like becoming aware of the questions and slowly easing into it. But the actual like so I started with about 15 minutes per day, then I moved it up to like 30, and then eventually it was like an hour per day, just like 2 weeks before the exam, so that I peaked at the exam. So everyone has like different rates of when they peak before an exam. For me, it's like 2 weeks of intense revision and I'll be at the best on the exam day. It's sort of knowing when you'll best be at your best is a good strategy. So for me, from previous exam experiences, it's like 2 weeks. That's how long it was. It might be longer for some other people.
Yeah, that's a really, really important point to realize, like when you'll peak, because for me, especially for my A-levels, I ended up burning out before I even started the exams themselves. And it's just a big risk, because for me, in terms of productivity, it goes a bit like this, then bam, plummets down, and you want to sit your exam in the period where your productivity is still increasing. So just as Lucy said, do a step increase in the amount of time that you give towards your UCAT. And as we said previously in the video, make sure that the day before your exam that you're not doing intense studying and that you're making sure that you are relaxing. Okay, cool. Okay, next question. I put it on the screen, then I took it off. Annie sent in, why do you have to do the UCAT? Yeah, just a general question.
So a lot of universities that are not the like Oxbridge and Imperial, who require the BMAT, which is a different admissions test. So the UCAT is the university, that's changed now, it used to be UK, but now other countries do it, the University Clinical Aptitude Test, which essentially it tests different skills that a clinician might need. So like pattern recognition, quick math skills, being able to read through stuff. And it's very much a sort of logic test, but it's just to see whether you'd be suited for working in that environment, which is why some universities use it as a metric for if someone's going into an interview or like just as part of a general application. Every university uses it differently. They have different boundaries for it, which is why you have to do it. It's one of the tests they require.
Right, she said it perfectly again. What she said is my answer. Right, next question. Aksan has just sent in how. Ooh, where's it gone? How to see the different patterns quickly. Because literally to me, they all look the same. Lucy, I think this is your area because you did well in abstract reasoning, right?
Okay, right. So abstract reasoning. There's very specific different sets of patterns that they use, and I would recommend looking at one square from set A and one square from set B, preferably the one with the least amount of shapes in it, because they always have to follow the rule, or in having to follow that rule, it allows you to see what the rule for that set is. Now, okay, so you might have seen online that there's this SCANS method, which is shape, color. I'm not quite sure what the rest of them stand for. I think it's better to go for more of an overall image, because if you look for specific shapes, you can get lost and get caught up in one reasoning hypothesis and then not be able to switch into what's the actual hypothesis. So true. The biggest part of abstract reasoning is to have a hypothesis, be able to test it, and then change it if you need to. Now, in terms of actually spotting the shapes, there are some rogue ones that you should be aware of, like right angles, they're quite fond of using. Changes in colour, they're also quite fond of using. So like if there's a certain grey shape, it makes this other thing happen in the box. Or if there's not a grey shape, it has this thing happening. So in that case, look for changes between the boxes, where there's like something really obviously different in some of them, but the same in others. And numbers of shapes are always important. Sizes of shapes is important, and number of sides. And the biggest thing that I'd say they use is odd and even. Odd and even is...
They absolutely love that. God knows why.
Yeah. So those are the major patterns I would recommend looking out for, being aware of. And also, there are like occasionally some really broad questions. So they have ones about intersections. So there's one practice question on the actual UCAT website where they have a load of nodes and then lines going between them. And there was a coloured node and it had an odd number of lines coming out of it. But if you're not used to like graph theory, which is like decision maths, which some people probably don't do, then that idea is probably quite strange to you, like odd and even nodes. But again, like look through the official UCAT questions because they do put out some really strange examples. There's this one where there's like a sheep and it has like weird triangles and these weird tails on it, which is it's one of the official UCAT questions they put out. So I would recommend checking out those and then doing just lots of practice questions and keeping in mind the right angles, odd and even, size and colour, and I think those are the main things you want to look out for.
Cool. Wow, Lucy just gave us like a whole page of amazing advice for the abstract reasoning, which is absolutely amazing. For me, I found the abstract reasoning section one of the hardest after verbal reasoning, which was just so difficult for me. And I guess I was exactly like you in the sense that I couldn't see the patterns no matter how hard I stared or how long I stared at them, I couldn't see them. But I guess what worked for me, because I never, even up until the day of my actual exam, I didn't master the technique for abstract reasoning. The process of elimination was something that worked quite well for me, because even if you can't spot the patterns, there are some of the options that are just obviously not the right answer. And if you have a selection of 5 options, if you eliminate 3 of them, then I guess you've narrowed down your chances to 50-50 of getting one right. And for me, abstract reasoning during medify, I would get like around 600 or even less at times, which was really poor. But the day of my exam, I managed to get 720, even though I guessed half the questions. So I don't even need a clap. I don't deserve the clap because I guessed half the questions, which wasn't great. But it just goes to show that because it is a multiple choice question paper, there is still a chance that you could do really well, even though you guess most of the questions. So, like, don't be put down by, like, getting poor scores in your medify practice, but that isn't a reason to say like don't practice at all, because there's like a 0.05% chance that you could get 900 in all the sections. But it's just some hope to you guys who were like me, who struggled to notice the patterns in abstract reasoning. But everything Lucy said is 100% valid and amazing. Thank you so much for that brilliant advice. Right, okay, next question. My Amazon delivery. Sorry, I'm just looking out my window. I can see my Amazon delivery, which I needed for this video. Oh gosh, never mind. Right. Next question is by Emelia, and she asks, is medify all I need to revise? I mean, I can start with the question, and Lucy, you can add anything if you want to. For me, I started by using the Medic portal, just as Lucy did. And I think when I was preparing, it wasn't free. You had like, actually, it was free. I used the Medic portal, but I found it limited in terms of feedback for individual questions, being able to track my progress, and I didn't enjoy it as much. I also used the book. So a lot of people use the ISC medical book. But what I found was that because the UCAT or the UCAT is an online exam where you need to get accustomed to doing it on a computer screen, you need to get accustomed to using the number pad, using keyboard shortcuts, doing it via paper and writing down the answers is limited in its effectiveness, because there's only so much preparation, exam preparation for the conditions that you can do through paper. It doesn't mean that it's not effective. You can still do it. I found that, taking my UCAT book when I was out or when I was at school was really helpful when I didn't have my laptop or internet access. But when I started to use Medify, that's literally all I used. It was very comprehensive in the sense that there were videos on how to do the certain sections. There were time questions, untimed questions. There were mini mocks, full mocks. And I found that was kind of all I needed. So I found that worked really well for me. It doesn't mean that you just need Medify or you can't succeed without it. But a lot of students do benefit from it. Ooh, okay. Lucy, do you have anything to add, sorry, before we move on?
Not particularly. I just used the Medic portal as like a question bank just to get used to it. I did find that it was limited, again, in the fact that they didn't have proper time sections or proper mock. They only had 2 full mocks, but they didn't have the biggest range of questions. So definitely try out Medify, because I think it's a lot better than service.
Cool. Right, moving on to the next question. Guys, keep sending in your questions. We're going to try and get through as many as possible during this live stream. K18 has just mentioned that I'm finding quantitative reasoning so hard to revise for. I guess if you missed what we said earlier about the quantitative reasoning, what works really well is customizing yourself to the keyboard shortcuts, because they save you a lot of time. And again, just like all the other sections, practice is so key, and make sure you're practicing the questions that you're weaker at. Next question sent in by Mackenzie. Shout out Mackenzie, my cousin. She asks, how do you get motivated? So yeah, Lucy, what motivated you to keep going?
Oh, well, just the fact that at the end of all this, I'd hopefully be able to get to become a doctor at the end.
I love that. I love that.
Not enough, if that's not enough motivation for you, then just being able to get through and say you've done the exam, and then being able to get the interviews to get there, just taking it step by step, setting goals for yourself. And what I find really helps is having check boxes. As silly as it sounds, the idea of checking off a box is just sort of in my mind. I'm like, yes, I did that thing. Yeah. But yeah, that's one thing that really motivates me. So I find it hard to separate myself off by time, but if I have a checkbox, it's a lot easier. So I procrastinate a lot. That's probably quite a common thing, but I procrastinate a lot while sat at my desk.
Yes.
So to work around that, instead of setting a time limit for myself where I might just not do what I'm meant to be doing, I set a checkbox. So it's not based on the time that I'm sat there. So if I get the stuff done, I get it done, no matter whether I've procrastinated in the middle or not, which I found really helps.
That's an amazing technique, which I actually need to start doing, because I'm exactly like you. I can set a time target that I want to achieve 3 hours of UCAT preparation, but within those 3 hours, how much time am I actually spending productive, right? So I guess, as Lucy said, doing checklists, writing down the goals you want to achieve is way more effective measure of how much you've done, rather than, oh, I spent 24 hours doing UCAT prep, when in reality you've spent 20 of those hours on your phone Netflixing, watching Vampire Diaries. I guess what worked well for motivating me, I'm one of those people that I like to have competitions with myself. Like, do you know what I mean? So for me, I managed to turn medify preparation into like this really cool, quirky game, right? And especially with
trying to get a high score.
Honestly, trying to get that high score, especially with medify, you're able to track your progress. And every single day I wanted to beat my previous day's progress and stats, which really kind of propelled me to continue. But again, you have to question how sustainable your sources of motivation are, because for me, being in competition with myself, what if like I didn't want to compete that day? Like, how sustainable is it for me to be driven just by competition? As Lucy said, having that end goal, Lucy said that what motivated her was, in the end, she was going to become a doctor if she aced this test and ended up getting an offer from medical school. Having that set in sight is absolutely amazing and motivating. I guess it was a similar thing for me, but... Sorry?
Don't let it be too much pressure for you. Because if the idea of having that massive goal causes you to like crack under the pressure, think of it less as a goal.
True.
As like a pressure on you. Yeah,
so important. Just, I guess, know what works well for you, know what drives you, know what ends up demotivating you, know when you're about to burn out, because burnout is literally like the worst thing that can happen to your motivation. So yeah, consistency, but listen to your body, listen to kind of how you're feeling, make sure you're looking after your mental health and everything else. Right, okay. Mackenzie, hope we answered your question. Next question sent in by Emelia. Again, we love it. Keep sending in your questions. She asks, when doing practice, how do you know the boundary of when to ensure you understand? You understand the question and when to just move on. So I think she means like in actual test time conditions.
Okay, right. So I have a good answer to this because I've answered this quite a few times to certain people. So you have a time limit, or like a hard time limit per question per section, and you can look these up. You can see how many questions there are and the time. If you spend longer than that time on that question and you haven't been able to answer it, move on. So for abstract reasoning, it's 14 seconds. For decision making, it's 29. For verbal reasoning, it's 44 seconds, and I think it's a bit longer for quantitative. So if you spend longer than that time on it, and there's a timer in the top of the exam on the screen, so you can see how much time you spent on it, but don't keep looking up, just see how much time you spent on the question. If you spent less time on other questions in the section, you can spend a bit longer on it. If not, once that time is up, move on. Yeah.
Sorry, let me just take myself off mute. Sorry, I was on mute the whole time. Right, okay. Yes, thank you so much for that piece of advice. I don't really have much to add on that. I guess, when did I start realising I didn't understand a question in actual practice? I guess it was that moment where my mind started to wander off, and I don't know, it's just like a natural, intuitive,
verbal reasoning.
Honest. We'll talk about verbal reason when we get to that. But honestly, I just feel as though it's a natural feeling where you realise, Fran, it's time to move on. And the more you practice listening to that inner voice, and the more you practice kind of rebelling against your inner perfectionist, the more accustomed and the more likely you are to do that in the real thing. But yeah, okay, moving on to the next question, and this was sent in by Visualized by Anonymous. This is such a sweet question. How is your day, guys? And how is life at Cambridge? I guess you can answer them at the same time.
Well, this is very relevant to me. So I had a supervision via Zoom. So at Cambridge, we have small group supervisions, which at Oxford you call tutorials, right?
Yeah, me and Lucy were debating which one sounds weirder, supervisions or tutorials.
So we abbreviate supervisions to supos, and in Oxford was it toots?
Toots. I think supos sounds so weird. Guys, comment in the section which sounds weirder, supos or toots.
But yeah, so supervisions are small group teaching sessions led by an academic or someone who's hired to teach someone, and they're no more than like 4 people per group. And so every college, Oxford and Cambridge are both collegiate universities, and they have small colleges that look after their students, do everything apart from like the lectures. So they take care of their housing, their food, or like the servery can like cook your own food, but it depends on the college that you're in whether your kitchens are actually any good. And they take care of your academic life and your mental health and everything encompassing student life apart from like the overall course. And so it's very nice being in a small close-knit community because it means you can make a lot of friends quite easily, and there's like less of a like here are all these anonymous medics that we don't know, make friends with all of them. It's more like you make friends with the people in your college. So it's really nice in that way, in that sense, which I assume is quite similar in Oxford, right?
Yeah, sorry, before I move on with that, I'm just reading some of the comments. This is why I was laughing, because everyone's saying super sounds weirder. I told you. Oh. It's like, oh, I'm going to a super. I'm sorry if anyone wants to go to Cambridge.
You know what's weirder? So we have natural scientists, and it gets abbreviated to nat skis.
I always found that weird. Imagine saying, yeah, I'm a nat ski, like. Nuts.
Yeah, if you misspeak, it's just.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Or if you're speaking too fast, it could sound like something else. Oh my gosh. Right, okay.
That is still the weirdest bit of terminology.
That's so funny. But yeah, exactly as you said, tutorials or toots at Oxford are very, very similar. I haven't had any toots so far over the holidays because our exams have been pushed back to the end of September. I guess in September that's when we'll start having our revision toots. But yeah, thank you for your question, Visualized by Anonymous. My day's been pretty good. This afternoon I was on a judging panel for Journey to Med. They have like a virtual science fair, which was really, really fun. But yes, okay. There's so many questions. How many hours per day roughly did you spend on UCAT revision? I guess we can quickly answer that. I think we've said it before, but we can repeat.
Yeah. You shouldn't be spending hours and hours per day. Like I spend 15 minutes per day at the start, and then I increase it to half an hour, and then maybe 45 minutes to an hour per day. But you shouldn't be spending like hours and hours on end doing revision, because your ability to revise will go down, and the quality just won't be as good. Like short bursts is better for this kind of stuff.
Perfect. Next question sent in by Jete. I hope I haven't butchered that name. And they ask, how many medify mini mocks for each section did you do leading up to the exam? Or Lucy, in your case, how many kind of mini mocks did you do?
Well, so I used Medic Portal, but at the start I just go through all the questions without a time limit. And when it came to mini mocks, I think there was like a few time sections for each of the sections, and I just did those when I felt I was comfortable with it. So it would be the 5 subsections, and then they had 2 full mocks, which I did, as I mentioned earlier, 3 days before and the day before the exam.
Cool. For me, I started using the mocks later on in my preparation because, there was no point doing the mocks if I didn't have that core understanding and practice. So I guess I started doing mini mocks 2 weeks before the exams, and I started doing full mocks a week before the exam, because that's when I thought I was most prepared. I didn't manage to get through all the medify sections. If you can, that's absolutely amazing, but again, don't feel that pressure to get every single question done on medify or whatever question bank you use, because there's so many questions out there. As long as the quality of your learning is good, then that completely is better than kind of having the quantity of questions. Next question sent in by Hafsa. And they ask, did you get a similar score to how you did in mocks, or worse or better? Again, we've answered this question, but we'll quickly go through it.
So with situational judgment, it fluctuated a lot in the mocks, and then in the actual exam I got band 3. But for the other sections, because the medic portal didn't give you like a specific score, I just sort of noted down like my rough percentages, and I think I did a lot better in the actual exam, mainly due to the fact the questions are actually easier than you think in the actual exam. They specifically make harder practice questions to get used to the hard scenarios, but the actual like exam questions aren't always as hard as you think they will be. You've like amped it up in the line.
Yeah, exactly the same as Lucy. I thought like I'd get to the exam and it'd be like medify questions on steroids, but it was literally the exact same thing, and it was what I was used to doing. And I guess it's similar to my driving test experience, my theory test, because I sat it in the same place like the driving test centre. I thought having to do the real exam would be harder, but in actual fact it was the same or like a little bit easier. So yeah, don't worry about like the real exam being harder, because in all the experiences I've heard of, it's always been the same or slightly easier. Cool. Lucy, how many more minutes do you have to do this live? Do you like need to go anywhere urgently? Because if you're cool, we can carry on for like next.
Go on for a while.
Cool. Okay, we can go on for like next 5 to 10 minutes. Get all these questions sent through. Okay, this is an interesting question, sent in by Visualized by Anonymous. What's one resource that you can't do without in your A levels? So I guess like you can't live without for your A levels, which we did quite a while back.
Well, okay, so I didn't have any like extra resources that I used. The textbook was because okay, so here's the fault with A levels and like issue with the whole education system.
Whoa, we're about to get political.
Yeah, at this point, at A levels, it's still just remembering and regurgitating information, and they're not really testing your understanding as well as they should be. So for A levels, you can just take your textbook, learn your textbook, and read, like do some sort of active learning with it. Don't just sit there and read the textbook. Like make your own notes out of it, make mind maps, but like just learn the textbook, because that's the syllabus. That's the stuff they're testing you on. It's a lot harder at university.
Oh my gosh, sometimes I wish that I had that syllabus at university, because then it would at least tell me what the heck I'm meant to be learning sometimes. But yeah, my number one thing I couldn't live without for A levels was this program called Exam Pro, and I understand that like a lot of students don't have access to it, and I think it's meant to just be for teachers, but I had access to it. And essentially it's a bank that's been made by AQA, where they have every single question ever asked for a lot of the subjects for A levels: biology, chemistry, physics, math, maybe not maths, but all the sciences. They had all the questions ever asked. And my number one like tip for A levels and GCSE sciences is nail the exam technique. Get used to reading mark schemes. Get used to reading and writing what the examiner wants, because as Lucy said, A levels and GCSEs are unfortunately 40% a measure of, you know, how good you are at that subject, how good you are at biology, and 60% a measure of, you know, how much have you prepared for this exam, or, you know, how much do you know examiner technique, how many mark schemes have you read through, which is not the best, but I guess it's, you know, what we have to work with. So Exam Pro is definitely good. If you can't get access to that, Physics and Maths Tutor do a similar thing. Oh, was that? I'm sorry. What you gonna say? Yeah, PMT.
Physics and Maths Tutor have every single maths past paper, and a few like other subjects as well.
Honestly, PMT saved me through A-level maths, for sure. And once, if you end up running out of questions for that topic for your exam board, then you can even use other exam boards questions. All you just need to do is note the parts of the syllabus that are the same and the parts that aren't the same. But I ended up using how have I forgotten the name of the exam board? What's that really hard exam board? I think it's like
EdXL?
No, the other one.
OCR?
That's the one. OCR. I don't know if you did OCR, Lucy, but whenever I saw OCR papers, they were always so much harder. I don't know why. But yeah,
it must be just how they've done it.
Yeah. I ended up using OCR questions for chemistry to kind of just push me and challenge me to kind of do better, I guess. Last few questions. Susie has asked, will this live stream be saved? Yes, so this live stream will be saved to my channel, but because it takes quite a while to process it, as I found out yesterday, it will probably be uploaded tomorrow. Next question. Sent in by Dashing Didi. She asks, how heavily does the UCAT score affect your admissions to Oxbridge unis?
Not at all.
Yeah, it doesn't. I guess like we do, Oxbridge look at the BMAT, so UCAT is the admissions test that is looked for certain universities, not all universities within the UK. But yeah, Oxford and Cambridge both look at the BMAT. But Lucy, I guess we can answer the question in terms of how much weighting do our universities put on the BMAT?
Oh, okay. So at Cambridge, it's just one part of the entire process, and you get the score before you get a call for interview. So for the BMAT, it's just used as sort of like a metric, but it's in combination with everything else, including like your personal statement and also your grades, your predicted grades, your GCSE grades. So the weighting's sort of like equal on everything before you get called to interview. And then interview has quite a high weighting, I feel.
Yeah, it's quite similar at, can you hear me? Oh, okay. I've just put myself back on. Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, it's quite similar at Oxford. But what's different between Oxford and Cambridge is that to shortlist applicants for interview, Oxford explicitly just look at the BMAT and your GCSE grades, and they look at a little bit of context.
Oh, really?
But it's like almost 50% GCSE, 50% BMAT. And I guess that was one of the reasons why I applied, because one, I preferred Oxford a lot more in terms of the city life and just the general university, but it was also kind of a strategic play because my GCSE grades were okay and I knew that I had a really good chance of getting to interview, and once I get to interview, the chances of me getting an offer were like significantly reduced because at Oxford they interview less students. I know that for Oxford it's like once you get to interview, it's like 3 interviewees per option, per place, sorry. What's the stats for Cambridge?
They offer a lot more interviews than they do offers at Cambridge, so it's more based on the interview because they want to see how you perform in a supervision setting, which is why the interviews are very much like a mini supervision. They get you to think out loud and answer a question. It's less about like trying to find out what you're like as a person. It's more about how you think at Cambridge. And so there's, I think it's about, I remember there was about 7 per place for interview.
Oh, okay.
At Cambridge. Yeah.
Nice.
Which is quite a lot. Yeah, but the opposite's true with like Imperial, where I also interviewed. It's like once you get to interview at Imperial, you basically have a position.
Yeah. Which kind of, it was reassuring for me because I knew that, you know, interviews weren't my strong suit. So I like having that thought that, okay, there's only like 3 other people fighting for this place was that extra reassurance. But it's not a reason why you should pick Oxford over Cambridge. I think what should be your deciding factor is whether you think you'd be better suited at that university or not. The likelihood is that if you get into Oxford, you'll probably get into Cambridge and vice versa. So definitely look at student life there and all that other good stuff. Okay, so next question.
That's also why you're only allowed to apply to...
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, carry on.
You're only allowed to apply to one of them.
Yeah. Honestly, that fact actually surprised me because I remember like being a naive year 10, like, okay, how do I decide between Oxford and Cambridge? Why don't I just apply to them both? And UCAS came along and was like, no, honey, you can only apply to one. Next question sent in by Eredia. She asks, best thing to do on test day and the days leading up to it. I guess answer this question again, but we'll quickly get there. I keep just pulling out the same questions. Okay, summarize it in like one sentence, like, or one tip.
Relax.
You stole mine, Lucy. Yeah, Lucy said it. Relax.
Chill.
Take a chill pill. Yeah, honestly, like you being stressed and, you know, anxious is only going to decrease your performance. So easier said than done, but practice like just getting yourself into that relaxed condition, whatever mechanisms you need to do that. Next question sent in by... I'm just like scrolling through all the comments saying that supos sound weird, and then Accent said toots sound weirder. I don't know what you're listening to. I'm just laughing at all these comments.
It still sounds weirder to me.
Anaya has just asked, I have my mocks in UCAT coming up. How would you say you revised for A-level mocks? I'm assuming she means like alongside preparation for admissions tests?
Okay. So I specifically booked my UCAT so it was later in the summer, so I wouldn't have to be competing with like either the start of year 13 or the end of year 12. But in terms of revising for admissions tests while you're trying to do A-levels, you just have to set a balance. You have to like either schedule for it or set certain like a checklist of goals to make sure you don't overwhelm yourself. Like just if you don't have time to be like intensely focused on the UCAT like every day, just set 15 minutes aside for it while doing the UCAT, and then also do like your normal revision alongside that, so you don't overwhelm yourself with either thing.
That's such an important point to realise, that when you're booking your test, make sure you're looking at other things that you might be doing alongside that. So for many of you guys, I know that because of the current situation, it might be harder to get work experience, but over this summer, you know, you're going to be focusing on your application. I keep saying that if you've watched my videos, you'll realise that I booked mine August something, which at the time was very, very late, and looking back now, I should have booked it earlier in my personal experience, because my whole summer was just spent, you know, studying for the UCAT, and I kind of pushed back revision for year 13. So if I'd have done my exam earlier, gotten that over and done with, not only could I, you know, have more time to relax, but I also had a lot more time to prepare for the BMAT and also for year 13. Now, when preparing for admissions tests such as the BMAT, which take place at the same time as A-levels, one thing I can say is you need to definitely learn to, you know, prioritize and also schedule. One of my biggest mistakes was definitely prioritizing application to university over my A-levels, and it meant that, you know, come December when I had mocks for A-level maths and stuff, I was so behind because I'd spent so little time like looking after my A-levels. And it's so important to realize that even if you end up getting offers at every single university, if you don't have the grades, you will be rejected either way, because you'll miss your offer. So the best kind of scenario in that case is, you know, to put more effort and time into your GCSEs, your A-levels, at the expense of maybe your application process, because you still have the option to apply the next year when you'll have your good grades to apply with. But there's definitely ways of balancing both. Okay, right, this is going to be the last question because I realise I have something at 6, so I'm going to have to go. Oh, guys, I'm so sorry I haven't managed to answer all these questions. Okay. I don't know which question to ask. Okay. Right, okay. This is a good question, and this will be our last one today. How do you cope with the stress of the UCAT?
How do you cope with the stress of it? Well, again, I think I've said this in like different ways. Making sure you set boundaries and don't let it overwhelm you. Set achievable goals. Don't try and stress yourself out trying to do too much. You essentially want to, through the process of revision, get comfortable with it so that you don't feel overwhelmed, because that can be a big stressor, especially if there's something that you're not as good at in one of the sections. That can be a big stressor as well. Just set aside a bit of time so that you start to get used to it, and you will improve over like however long it is, and then that process should help you feel less stressed. Yeah, slowly building into it.
Definitely. Exactly as Lucy said, it's so important to kind of listen to your body, as I've said before. Listen to when you feel too much is too much. Like, your mental health is worth way more than a good UCAT score. You can always redo the UCAT, but you can't really redo kind of your mental health. So always keeping that at the forefront of everything you do, making sure that when your body tells you that you've done too much work, that you actually listen to it. Making sure you have a good kind of sleep schedule. That really helps with me feeling energetic, which naturally makes me feel less stressed. But okay, so guys, we have reached the end of today's live stream. I'm sorry we didn't manage to get through all the questions. I've put Lucy's Instagram details in the description bar below, and also on screen right now. You can see her IG account is under the handle at Book of Bones, and she has an amazing aesthetic feed where she shares her revision as a second year medic, and she is the most talented drawer. I just like, she's such an artist. So check out her page on Instagram, and yeah, if you have any more questions, DM either me on Instagram or Lucy on Instagram, and we'll happily answer them. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for tomorrow's video and my future videos. All the details are on my Instagram post under the handle at francesca.x. And yeah, with that said, we're gonna love you and leave you, and have an amazing day. See you guys later.
Bye.
Bye.